Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Insignificant Stoic. Not my car today, I'm in my basement. Um, and this video is in response to Dan G, who sent a request for interpretation or analysis or overview of Marcus Aurelius' meditation, Book 5, Section 20. I'd like to say at first that this version um, of the Meditations, it's published by the Modern Library in New York. It's a new translation with an introduction of Gregory Hayes, is a superb translation for two reasons. First of all, Mr. Hayes does a fabulous job in the front matter um, describing Stoicism and what exactly it is that Marcus Aurelius is saying. The second thing that's great about it is it's modern translation. And, we're used to reading very simplified language, very simple sentence structures. It's actually getting worse with social media and whatnot. But that means that, the older translations are harder for us to comfortably access, only because of the different ways that the sentences were structured and the types of phrasing they used, sometimes even the vocabulary. But this one is a very modern version, very easy to read, nothing difficult. Um, it's very good, actually, I think. So I highly recommend this one. The other one that I would recommend, and I recommend this author as well, the same author, is Peter Hadot, or I'm sorry, Pierre Hadot. He wrote a book called The Inner Citadel, and it was his analysis of Marcus Aurelius's meditations, and he does a fabulous job going line by line and discussing the philosophical underpinnings of what he was saying. So Pierre had a fabulous book. He wrote one other book. I think it was the Philosophical Life or something like that. It's another fabulous book. I highly recommend both of them if you're into understanding philosophy, especially Stoicism. Um, yeah, he's very knowledgeable, very good. So if you want to do deeper research into the text, that's the guy. Unfortunately, though, I have to say that his Inner Citadel and the Meditations isn't finished. He unfortunately died before he could finish that. So we are left guessing at the rest of it. To begin with, Marcus Aurelius he lived somewhere in AD 121 to 180. He was the last, I think, of the five good emperors. I might have that right. He was known for his modesty and known for his simplicity, actually, and his wisdom and his fairness, and he garnered for himself the title of a good emperor. He was fair. He had a sense of responsibility for what he was doing. He saw, as the most powerful man in the world at that time, he saw people as people, that everyone had a value, and everyone was valuable. And he took it to heart, and he lived that way. He truly was a philosopher king. Anyway, when he was away on campaign, and he spent most of his life away on campaign after his father died, or I think it was his father, adopted father died. He spent most of it in Western Europe, fighting back, maintaining the borders, attempting to maintain the borders of the Roman Empire. Anyway, while he was on campaign, he kept a journal, and that's what Meditations is. It's his own personal, private journal. That being said, there's some difficulty in understanding some of these things because, he wrote this for himself. That means that sometimes there are things here that are a little cryptic. And the only way that we can understand it is by, shouldering in, the context of Stoic philosophy or whatever you want. They try to create the context for it. so it can be interpreted. But it's a thing that's been read for a long, 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 long time and has left its mark on Western civilization. So it's a good book to read, actually. There's a lot of, uh, you know, Stoic wisdom. Although, Marcus Aurelius, even here, he's not a pure Stoic. There are some ideas in here that aren't Stoic, but, you know, even that, though, is part of the Stoic ethos to take from other things. And we'll get into that. And that's one other thing I want to say. I know we're 5.5 minutes in, and this is a hell of a long introduction, but I do want to say that this is out of joint for me. I didn't plan to go this far into Marcus Aurelius yet. I wanted to do the history of Zeno and the beginning of Stoicism, and then get into Epictetus. But just to note, fans come first. If someone has a question, I'll do my best to answer. Now, another thing to keep in mind, copyrights. It's YouTube. So YouTube, I don't know if I can read this whole thing. So I will have to do it. I'll have to paraphrase some of these things. So anyway, let's get a sense of what he is talking about here in Meditations, Marcus Aurelius Meditations, Book 5, portion, Section 20. He says that people are his proper occupation, and it's our job. Now, when he says our job, what he means is, is that the royal we, so to speak, is that, and you figure he's writing to himself. But it is also a universal, our men's job, to do good to people and to even tolerate them. So he sees in himself, again, he's writing to himself, that he sees it as his occupation, as the emperor of Rome, that his job is to do good to people, you could say as subjects, and even to tolerate them. Okay? So people have to be tolerated in Stoicism. But when I say tolerated, I don't mean in the modern sense of tolerated. I mean in the Stoic sense, which is not everyone is perfect. In that sense, you tolerate them. But regardless of that, to do them good, right? To do them good. He goes on to say that they will obstruct this task of doing good. And in some ways, when they do that, that's actually irrelevant. When they sort of, put things in the way of you doing good, that's irrelevant. Now that behavior might impede, for example, that doing good and one's intentions and one's dispositions, it might impede it. But, we're able to adapt. We're able to accommodate the situation. He says that their mind, because remember, Stoics are all about reason, converts, and I will say here, converts to its own purpose the obstacle to our acting. What he's saying here is that you can take this obstacle, and you're smart enough, you've been given reason by nature, and if you pay attention to reason and nature and the living out of virtue, you'll come up with a way. That problem, he says now, this impediment to your action, right, advances the action itself. Okay? In other words, when you come up to an impediment, when you come up to someone who you're trying to do good for, or do good to them or to the people in general or whatever, but whenever these people present problems to us, that's irrelevant. It's not the problem. It's not them. It's just an opportunity for you to use your reason according to nature and virtue to find a way to cope with it, to deal with it, to still do what you're meant to do, which is to do good. And I will quote again here at the very end, What stands in the way becomes the way. In other words, people present problems to you. You want to do good to them or to others. Everyone has their interests. Everyone has their biases. You're surrounded by corruption. And I don't mean corruption as in, criminals or whatever, although that's there. But imperfect people. And we can't get mad at those people. That should be irrelevant. But the difficulties that are placed in front of us because of them, that impede our doing good to them or to others, that is actually an opportunity to use your reason, given by nature, acted out in virtue, to do the good. In other words, to find a way to do it. So that difficulty that you're faced with, that impediment, that shows you the way to do it. There's a saying in Russian, if you want to know what you need to do, look at your feet. Right? Where do you need to go? Just look around you. Where do you need to go? You figure it out. In Stoicism, there is a statement that says that, I think Seneca said this, I could have it wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, please, but everything is fuel for the fire. So every difficulty, every impediment, as he says, everything that hinders you from doing good or living according to nature, all of that becomes an exercise. Let me put it this way, in an Orthodox understanding. Temptation for us is a difficult thing to bear, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. Temptation is help for us. St. Paisius even says this, that when the devil tries to tempt us, it's an opportunity for us to exercise our will. Okay? Becomes fuel for the fire. You don't learn how to fight in combat unless you fight in combat, right? That's what mock battles are for. You don't learn how to box in a ring unless you spar. What both the church, I guess, and Marcus Aurelius is saying from slightly different points of view is that the difficulties become arenas. And that's something the church even calls it, arenas, where we learn to fight, we learn to adapt, we learn to move forward, to still continue doing good, not judging the person who's stopping us, but learn from it. Wrestle. I mentioned before in this Stoic story about Cato, who was made fun of by children and he was bald. Well, what were some of the things he had to deal with? Well, one of them was being mocked by children and not be angry at them. They presented the way. The way was what? Don't be angry with them. Don't act out. To ask the question, what is true? Are they telling me the truth? Yes, I'm bald. Yeah, okay. That's the truth. So, do you see what I'm saying? The difficulties that we have in life, if, according to Stoics, we follow nature and virtue and reason, will show us exactly what we have to do. Because remember, Stoicism is really an internal thing more so than external. It's restraining ourselves. It's keeping away from the passions, keeping away from the vices, and doing virtue, doing good. So that's what I've got today. If anybody else has any other requests, please let me know. Have a great day.